Welcome back, everybody. Today we're taking a deep dive into something a lot of you have been asking about. PhDs.
Oh, yeah.
You've sent in a ton of articles, a ton of research, all asking the same question. Are PhDs still, like, the golden ticket they used to be?
Right.
And honestly, some of the stuff you guys sent in, kind of wild.
Yeah, like what?
Well, one article I was looking at mentioned that, get this, Australia, domestic PhD enrollment's down 8% over the past 5 years.
Wow.
That's a big drop, right?
Yeah, that is significant.
What's happening? What's going on?
Well, it's a trend, for sure. Something worth exploring.
Right.
And it's not just Australia. There are, signs this is happening all over.
Really?
So let's use all this great stuff you sent and really dive into, the why.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think we can break it down into three main things.
Okay.
Money woes, shifting demographics, and what's happening with international students.
Okay, so let's unpack that first one. Money woes. The stuff you sent about PhD finances is, well, kind of bleak.
Yeah.
Is it really that tough out there?
Well, it's definitely a challenge, no question.
Right.
Stipends, the financial support PhD students get, they've been, flatlining for years.
Really?
And the cost of living, skyrocketing.
So,
Rent, food, healthcare, all going up, up, up. Well, the money stays the same.
Yeah, so forget groundbreaking research. They're worried about, making rent.
Exactly.
Did any of this stuff talk about fixing this stipend thing?
Yeah, actually, one article had this kind of radical idea, pegging PhD stipends to the median income in the research area.
So, if you're studying high-paying fields, you get a higher stipend.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Imagine, PhD students could live comfortably while they study.
That's a game changer.
Right.
No more ramen noodles every night. But okay, what about even if stipends go up, all that debt?
Oh, you mean from undergrad?
Yeah, a lot of PhD students already have loans, right?
Oh, absolutely. Huge burden for a lot of people. One study even found 43% of psychology doctoral students super stressed about debt.
I bet.
It's no wonder people are feeling burnt out, you know? Like delaying life stuff, starting a family, buying a house, just to, stay afloat.
Yeah, that's a lot to deal with. And I kind of think this impacts universities too, right?
Oh, for sure.
If you can't attract the best people, because the pay is terrible.
Right.
What happens to the research?
Exactly. Universities have got to stay competitive. Maybe, look at different ways to fund things.
Like what?
Partnerships with companies, maybe philanthropic stuff, anything to help those stipends.
So it's bigger than just, raising stipends. It's got to be a whole solution, right?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's move on to number 2.
Okay.
Shifting demographics. What's changing?
Well, the good news is things are getting more diverse.
Early.
Yeah. We're seeing a big increase in underrepresented minority students in U.S. doctoral programs.
How big are we talking?
89% jump since 2019.
89. That's huge.
It is.
What's driving that?
Well, your articles mentioned a few things, more outreach, changes in who's going to college in general.
Okay.
But the cool thing is these students now make up 22% of all PhD students, and even more, 25% in STEM fields.
Wow. That's a good sign, right?
I think so, yeah. Academia is starting to look more like, actual society.
For sure. And what about women in these programs? Any changes there?
Yeah, definitely. More women are pursuing PhDs, too, especially in science, engineering, health, areas that used to be mostly men.
Okay, so more diversity, but money's still an issue. It's a mixed bag so far.
It is.
What about the last thing, international students? What's going on there?
Well, this one's a little tricky, It really depends what field you're talking about, what country.
Okay.
One thing your articles mentioned, though, is fewer international students, especially in U.S. STEM programs. There was a drop in Chinese students back in fall 2019.
Interesting. One of the articles you sent was about the skills gap in tech.
Uh-huh.
Could this be part of the problem? Fewer international students?
Yeah, could be. Especially since back in 2019 and 2020, most STEM masters and doctorate degrees, they went to international students.
Wow.
So yeah, if fewer of them are coming to the U.S. for these degrees,
right,
it could make things even worse.
So it's not just an academic problem, it affects everyone.
Right.
But why are fewer international students coming? Is it visas?
Well, visas are definitely part of it.
Yep.
Longer processing times, tougher requirements. It's just harder to come here to study. Plus, there's been a lot of talk about the climate for international students in recent years.
Yeah.
Not feeling as welcome, reports of racial profiling, that kind of thing.
I can see why people might be hesitant,
Yeah.
If you don't feel safe, why would you go there?
Exactly.
And on top of all that, the pandemic, that must have had a huge impact.
Oh, absolutely. The pandemic, threw everything for a loop.
Right.
Enrollment dropped like 43% in 2020.
Wow.
Travel bans, lockdowns, the economy. It was just a really tough time to, pick up and move to a new country.
So it's like this whole web of problems,
It is, yeah.
Money, demographics, international students. It's complicated.
It really is.
So, what does it all mean for PhDs? Should people even bother anymore?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
And one we're going to dig into, as we keep going with this deep dive.
Okay.
But I think for now, it's safe to say things are changing. And you got to understand what's going on if you're thinking about this path.
Feels like we're just scratching the surface.
We are, yeah.
There's so much more to uncover.
There is.
Okay, so we've talked about the money problems, demographics changing, and all the stuff with international students. But before we get to, should people even do a PhD anymore? Something's been bugging me. We talked about more minority students in U.S. PhD programs, which is great, but also how hard it is financially for a lot of PhD students.
Yeah.
Could those two things be connected?
That's a really good point. It's very possible that money problems are actually making it harder to have more diversity.
How so?
Well, imagine you're a student, right, from an underrepresented background, you're excited about research, but you also know PhDs don't pay much.
Right.
Maybe you already have loans from undergrad, and now you're looking at these stipends that barely cover rent.
Yeah.
It's a huge risk, especially for students who are already facing, systemic disadvantages.
So it's like if you can't afford the risk, you can't even consider a PhD.
Exactly. And universities, they might be making this worse without realizing it.
How?
Well, if they don't give enough financial support, they're basically saying, only apply if you can already afford it.
Right.
And who can usually afford it? People from wealthier backgrounds.
Right.
So it's a cycle, Money problems limit diversity. And less diversity can actually hurt innovation and progress.
It's like we're stuck.
Yeah, kind of.
So universities really need to make financial support a priority, right?
If they want the best people from all backgrounds, yes, absolutely.
And this ties back to what we were talking about before, not enough skilled workers in certain industries.
Right.
If we make it too hard for talented people from all backgrounds to get these advanced degrees, we're only hurting ourselves in the long run.
Exactly. It's like we're limiting our own potential for innovation and growth.
I also got a sense from these articles, though, that some PhD students are just, disillusioned, like it's not worth the struggle anymore.
Yeah, I can see that. It's a real concern and one that universities and policymakers need to address. And it's not just about, throwing money at the problem.
Right.
Although that would help.
Of course.
It's about making PhD students feel valued, supported both financially and professionally.
So better mentors, more resources, actually acknowledging how important their research is.
Exactly. And being honest with students about, the job market.
What do you mean?
Academia is super competitive. A PhD doesn't guarantee you'll be a professor. We need to prepare students for different careers, even outside of academia.
I feel like there's this idea that if you get a PhD, you have to become a professor.
Right, but honestly, it opens up so many doors, especially now, with industries becoming more complex, more data-driven.
So a PhD is valuable even if you don't stay in academia.
Absolutely. It shows you can think critically, solve problems, do research. Those skills are in high demand everywhere.
So maybe part of the solution is changing how we think about PhDs, what they can lead to, and then helping students succeed in those different careers.
Exactly. It's not PhD equals professor. It's PhD equals highly skilled person who can contribute to society in all kinds of ways.
I like that. It's like it gives people options,
It does, and it's good for society, too.
Yeah.
Imagine PhDs working in government, in companies, in nonprofits,
Right.
using their skills to solve real-world problems.
That's a cool vision. Okay, so we've talked about universities. What about policymakers? What can they do?
Oh, policymakers, they have a lot of power here. They can fund research, give incentives to businesses to hire PhDs, and support programs that promote diversity and inclusion in higher education.
So it sounds like we need everyone to work together to solve this, right?
It's not just universities, it's not just students, it's not just policymakers, it's all of us.
We have to create a system that values knowledge, that invests in education, that recognizes how important skilled people are from all backgrounds.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It's a shared responsibility.
One thing that keeps coming back to me is this idea of adaptability. maybe the whole PhD system needs to change.
Oh, interesting. What do you mean?
Well, the traditional PhD, years of full-time study, research, it's a lot.
Yeah, it's intense.
And it's really inflexible, especially if you have a family or other responsibilities.
Right. Not everyone can put their life on hold for 5, 6 years.
What if there were more options? Part-time programs, online courses, even shorter degrees that are more focused.
I like that.
It would make PhDs more accessible, and maybe even help with the money problems we were talking about.
Yeah, definitely. And it could help connect academia and industry better, too.
How so?
Well, if PhD programs were designed with the needs of the workforce in mind, graduates would be more prepared for jobs outside of academia.
That makes sense.
It's all about adaptability, being open to new ways of doing things that work better for everyone.
So making PhDs more relevant, more accessible, more valuable, basically.
That's it.
And who knows, maybe all these changes would actually make more people want to do PhDs again.
Maybe we'd see a resurgence in enrollment, a renewed appreciation for research.
That would be pretty cool. A win-win for everybody.
Speaking of wins, we've covered a lot today.
We have. This has been great. But before we move on, did we miss anything from those articles you sent? Anything else we should talk about?
Let me see. Oh, actually, yes. There was one little thing I wanted to mention.
Okay, what is it?
One of the articles said that even though international student enrollment is down overall, there are actually more PhD applications from certain countries.
Really?
Yeah, especially in fields like AI and data science.
Uh-huh. Which countries?
It specifically mentioned India and some European countries.
So even with the decline, some fields, some countries, they're doing well.
It's not just a simple story, It's complicated. It shows that things are affected by so many different factors, like what's happening in the world, the economy, new fields emerging.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder what other trends we might be missing.
It's like you got to look beyond the headlines to really understand what's going on. You do, and it shows how important it is to work together globally, on research and education.
For sure.
Sharing knowledge, sharing resources to solve problems that affect everyone.
I agree. And, it's encouraging to see that even with the challenges, people still want to learn. They want to push the boundaries of knowledge.
Right.
That gives me hope for the future of PhDs, for higher education in general.
There's still a lot to be excited about.
There is.
Okay, well, I think that's about it for this part of our deep dive. Wow. I mean, it's amazing how much we got out of those articles.
I know, right?
Really makes you think. We went from our PhDs dying to how can we make them even better?
Yeah, it's been quite the journey, hasn't it?
It has. Honestly, I've learned so much about the value of a PhD.
Me too.
It's not just about, being a professor anymore.
Right. It's about the skills you learn, the way you learn to think. It can apply to so many things.
And maybe if we highlight those other paths, it takes some pressure off that academic job market.
That's a great point. If more PhDs are open to other careers, it could really help. More balance, more options for everybody.
Right. It's like expanding the possibilities for everyone, which brings us back to that big question from before. What does this all mean for higher education? Where do we go from here?
I think higher education's at a turning point. The old way of doing PhDs, it's not working as well anymore. Universities need to adapt, change things up, if they want to stay relevant.
So we need a whole new vision, right, for what higher ed can be in the 21st century.
Exactly. We need to be creative, Think differently about how we teach, how we fund things, how you support PhD students in their careers.
And make sure it's inclusive, right? So everyone has a chance, no matter their background, their financial situation.
It's a big challenge for sure. But I think we can do it if we're willing to embrace change and work together, create a better experience for everyone.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And I think that's a great place to wrap things up.
It is.
Thanks so much for joining me for this deep dive. It's been awesome.
Likewise.
And to everyone listening, thank you for sending in such interesting stuff.
Yeah, you really got us thinking.
And this is just the start, Keep researching, keep asking questions, keep talking about the future of PhDs in higher education, because ultimately the future is up to us, right?
Yeah.
All right, well, on that note, we'll sign off. Until next time, keep diving deep.